In ancient times, Chania was known as Cydonia and began as a Minoan settlement, but there are traces of occupation going back to Neolithic times. In 69 BC, the Romans conquered the town and it became an independent city-state, minting its own coins. It became a Christian settlement until the arrival of the Arabs. After the Crusades, it became a Venetian town until conquered by the Ottoman Turks in 1645, and it only became part of the Kingdom of Greece in 1913. On May the 20th, 1941, began the bombing of western Crete by the German airplanes. The intense aerial attack had major effects, especially at the old town of Chania, leaving behind numerous ruins and causing extensive destruction to the civil buildings and monuments. Chania is Crete's second city and offers visitors a graceful blend of Venetian, Turkish and neoclassical architecture in spite of the ravages inflicted on it at the time of the Battle of Crete. The centre of the old town is lively and attractive. It makes a superb place to base oneself, though perhaps not in the height of summer. Besides the architecture, the city offers a clutch of excellent museums, some of them, like the archaeological and the folklore museums, housed in fine old buildings. In 1450 BC, a great natural catastrophe befell the island of Crete and Chania was destroyed, but was rebuilt. Its products were recognised as far as Knossos and Cyprus. The subsequent history of the town is difficult to map, as there are very few architectural remains and only the odd representation, such as the frieze in the local archaeological museum showing the facade of a temple and the statue of a goddess surrounded by archers. The abundance of ceramics found around Chania are testimony to the many ancient writers and show that the life and prosperity of the town continued well into the Roman period. In 69 BC, the Roman consul Metellus defeated the Cretans and conquered Chania, which he called Cydonia, to which he granted the privilege of an independent city-state. Cydonia minted its own coins until the 3rd century. The first Byzantine period and the Arab rule that followed are poorly documented archaeologically. During the Byzantine period, Christianity spread and the town was the seat of a bishop. During Arab rule, the Christian population was persecuted and moved to the mountains. The Byzantine Empire retook the city in 961 and held it until 1204. The Byzantines began to fortify it against another Arab invasion using materials from the ancient buildings of the area. Every day we set off from the Nefali Hotel and pass through this little park dedicated to the Ottoman Turks who controlled Crete for almost 300 years. Today, a great many Turkish tourists visiting the island come to Chania to see the remnants of their empire, and this park is a token to their contribution to the community and the town over the years. Around every corner, some fascinating detail was everywhere to be found, from ornamental wrought iron gates, interesting archways, roadside monuments, delightful fountains, but the shop selling Jameson's famous Irish whiskey was a highlight for me. As cat lovers, we encountered countless of our feline friends all over Crete and casually photographed them as we passed. Most were in great condition and most were wild, but looked forward to the arrival of tourists, as this created an abundance of surplus food. A restaurateur told me that during the winter months the situation was not as happy for the cats, but the locals did their best for them. A Catholic church run by the Capuchins was accessed through this humble archway. The church itself was pleasing, but relatively simple compared with the many Byzantine churches. This church and the Folk Museum shared the same small courtyard. Compared to its size, there are a great many Greek Orthodox churches in Crete, and well attended, with many displays of religious fervour and processions. It is considered that this may be because of the 2,500 years when Christians were persecuted for their worship. At its eastern end stands this magnificent mosque, built in 1645 when the Ottoman Turks took over the city from the Venetians. It is called the Mosque of the Janissaries. The mosque is now used as an exhibition hall. On the western side of the Venetian fortifications is the monastery of San Salvatore, where one will see the fresco of St. George slaying the dragon and other Byzantine and post-Byzantine items. The foundation of Agios Nikolaos, or St. Nicholas's Church, was laid in 1320. Under the Venetians it was the church of a Dominican priory, but when the Ottoman Turks invaded, it was converted into the imperial mosque of Sultan Ibrahim to house a magic sword, which is still on display there. In front of this church there is an old plane tree from which an Orthodox bishop was hanged during a pro-independence rising in 1821. In 1918, almost 100 years later, the church was returned to Orthodox worship, but the Muslim minaret was retained on the right-hand side as one faces the church. Rather than destroy it, a tower of more Christian appeal was erected on the other side to reclaim the church as Orthodox. The former Church of St. Francis, with its wide vaulted nave and narrow aisles, makes a good home for Chania's archaeological collection. The church became a mosque during the Ottoman occupation, and a small garden to the north retains the base of the minaret and a pretty octagonal fountain for ritual ablutions. The main body of the collection covers the development of Western Crete up to Roman times. Labelling is a little erratic and explanatory notes minimal. Artifacts from the prehistoric period, that is the late Neolithic and Bronze Age, take up the space nearest to the entrance. The late Neolithic collection shows hand axes, stone vases and obsidian blades, and originates from cave sites and indicates contact with the Cyclades. Concerning the Bronze Age, a large part of the display concentrates on finds from the later Minoan period and the cemetery of Chania, including the burial of a newborn dog. Much of the pottery was produced in a local workshop, as shown by the fine, distinctive clay. One of the outstanding products of this workshop is the pyxis with a man playing a lyre in a landscape with birds. It was found in a chamber tomb near the Calaris River below Aperta. Pottery from the same workshop has been found as far away as Cyprus and Sardinia, showing extensive trading activities between Western Crete and the Mediterranean world in the post-Palatial period. Finds from the Phylaki Apokorona Tholos of the same period include, with figures of helmeted soldiers showing Mycenaean influence, as well as a collection of seals and seal impressions and jewellery. The main Minoan site of Kydonia on Castelli Hill, destroyed by fire in 1450 BC, is well represented, with a display of linear A script fired in the blaze that consumed the palace. In the central case, a seal impression, known as the Master Impression, shows a young god or a ruler holding a staff and standing on top of a large building topped with horns of consecration. This is set in a rocky landscape by the sea. The scene has been interpreted as the representation of a city, a palace or a sanctuary. The discovery in 1989 of linear B tablets at the Castelli site confirms that the settlement went on to prosper during the post-Palatial period, at least until the 13th century BC. Hellenistic and Roman artifacts are represented with gold necklaces inlaid with filigree, gold earrings, coiled hair ornaments, remains of a bronze gilded wreath, and gold thread woven into a garment. From the eparchy of Selenos comes a collection of painted bull figurines, which are now a substitute for bull sacrifice, and this comes from the sanctuary of Poseidon at Tisciana, which dates from the 4th century BC until the 2nd century AD. Some have very lifelike dewlaps, and one has its tongue out. More finds from the area are in the North Isle. Note the glass ingot from Tara, and the marble vases and gold burial ornaments from Elrios. The top end of the museum is dedicated to a Roman floor mosaic uncovered during building works in modern Chania, and to Roman and Hellenistic sanctuary and stelae. These include an Asclepios from Lissos, a representation of the goddess Decania with hound from the Decanian sanctuary on Cape Spathia, and the philosopher of Elrios, a Roman copy of a Greek statue reconstructed from fragments. The South Isle is taken up by finds from cemeteries of the geometric period and later material. The Folklore Museum is housed in a beautiful mansion in the same courtyard as the Roman Catholic Church on Aki Kunduriotti on the outer harbour. The Maritime Museum is in a restored building by the Firkas Tower. It's set out on 2 floors and covers the history of seafaring from the Bronze Age to modern times. Every day we took a bus for a short trip to the sea for a refreshing swim. The grass on the sand dunes was too sharp to walk on in bare feet, and many of the maritime plants were strange to our eyes. We then returned to our hotel and prepared for an evening of relaxation and adventure. In the evenings, when the heat had gone out of the sun, we returned to the harbour and walked along its extended arms, reaching into the sea, admiring the views in all directions, and the lighthouse held a particular fascination for us. As we sat sipping a refreshing glass of wine, I had a chance to photograph the many comings and goings of the various boats, many of which had glass bottoms to view the sea life beneath. In the evenings, horse and carriage rides were provided along the harbour for the visitors. The carriages would enter the old town to see its sights, and it was a delightful way to absorb the many wonderful vistas and points of historic interest. As it was October, the visitors were growing less, and the queues of waiting carriages were growing longer. These are the famous arsenali, where the Venetians built their sea-going ships, applying their trade to far-off shores, making them a superpower of the sea, controlling trade for many years. Warships were also built to help ward off an attack from Turkey. Some of the most spectacular panoramas could be viewed across the harbour towards the buildings on the opposite side. There were many fine buildings of historic interest, well-located hotels and souvenir shops, and at their base endless rows of cafes and tavernas, each with their own ambassador, who would approach you with a smile wishing you well, but once they recognised your language, they then invited you to sample their wares, assuring you that the finest moussaka and other local dishes were only available at their tables. We had a great time in Chania, so much to see, so much to enjoy. The museums were great, the food was excellent, the townsfolk welcoming and friendly. Having walked for hours, it was nice to sit down one of the many tavernas for a refreshing drink. As the intensity of the sun abated, we slowly made our way back to the hotel. The night wasn't over. We wandered through the shopping district, looking in bright and inviting shops, seeking out a bargain here and there. Postcards would have to be sent, and searching for that special something that would make us so happy and bring back memories. We cleaned up and set off again to enjoy the nightlife and its attractions. Fully watered and fed, we retired as usual to the harbour to watch the sun set behind the fortress and observe the glow of the lighthouse become ever more intense as the darkness prevailed.